Hello everyone, my name is Samira and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to continue our chapter Organisms and Life Processes. So let me start by presenting my screen. Okay. So continuing with our chapter, different enzymes work best at optimum temperatures and pH. And now let's see some examples of enzymes. So pepsin, it is a protease, so a type of protease enzyme. So pepsin works at the optimum pH 1 to 2. 1 to 2 means it works best in the acidic state and its optimum temperature is 30 degrees. Trypsin, another form of the enzyme protease. So it is working best at the optimum pH of 9, which is a strong alkaline and works best at temperature 65 degrees. And lipase, stomach lipase, so it works best at 4.5 to 5 pH, which is a low acidic, and it works best at 37 degrees. Maltase, 6.5 pH, which is a low acidic, and it is at 48 to 50 degrees. Maltose, 7.8 to 7.8, which is in a neutral stage, and 48 to 50 degrees, just like maltase. Pancreatic lipase. Pancreatic lipase is formed in the pancreas of our body. It works best at 8, which is a strong alkaline, and 37 degrees optimum temperature. Amylase, 7, it works best at neutral, and 37 to 37 degrees optimum temperature. So these are some examples of enzymes and their optimum pH and temperature. Next, how cells get energy. A cell needs a source of energy in order to be able to do all operations needed for life. It gets its energy by breaking down food molecules to release the stored chemical energy that they contain. This process is called respiration. Respiration happens in all cells of our body. Oxygen is used to oxidize food, and carbon dioxide and water are released as waste products. The main food oxidized is sugar called glucose. Glucose contains stored chemical energy that can be converted into other forms of energy that can be used by cells. So respiration releases some heat energy, but most is used up to make substances called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. The energy stored in ATP can be used for contraction of muscle cells, producing movement, active transport of molecules and ions, building large molecules such as protein, and cell division. Next, the energy released as heat is also used to maintain body temperature in mammals and birds. The reaction is glucose plus oxygen gives you carbon dioxide, water plus energy. So this is the word equation and this is the chemical equation. Glucose is C6H12O6 plus 6O2 gives you 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O plus some energy. Okay. This is called aerobic respiration, which uses oxygen in the reaction. It takes place gradually as a sequence of small steps, which releases the energy of the glucose in small amounts. Each step of this process is catalyzed by different enzymes. The later steps in the process are aerobic ones, and these are the ones that release the energy the most. They happen in the mitochondria of the cell. They use oxygen in the reaction. In the reaction, are we using oxygen? So in any reaction that shows glucose plus oxygen or anything, you can blindly say that this is an aerobic respiration because it is using oxygen. Okay, this happens in the mitochondria of the cell. In my previous video, we talked about the cell structure functions, the organelles in the cells and their functions. So we talked that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell and aerobic respiration releases energy. Respiration releases energy while other cells processes use it up. They transfer this energy by chemical called adenosine triphosphate or ATP. So as respiration makes energy, other cells use up that energy. To transfer the energy produced to the ones that use energy, they use a chemical called ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. And ATP is composed of an organic molecule called adenosine attached to 3-phosphate group. In a cell, ATP can be broken down losing one phosphate and forming adenosine diphosphate, ADP. During respiration, the opposite happens. Energy from the oxidation of glucose is used to drive the reverse action and a phosphate is added to the ATP. ATP is described as the energy currency of the cell. It transfers the energy between the processes that release it and the one that uses it. Okay, next. Anaerobic respiration. Some cells respire without using oxygen. This type of respiration is known as anaerobic respiration. Since glucose is not completely broken down, less energy is released. The advantage of anaerobic respiration is that it can happen in any place where there is short oxygen supply. Two examples of anaerobic respiration are respiration in yeast and molecules. Yeast in beer mostly, and muscles, beer and bread. So anaerobic respiration in yeast. Yeast are single-celled fungi. They are used in processes such as baking bread. When yeast cells are preventing from getting oxygen, they stop respiring aerobically and respire anaerobically instead. The glucose is partially broken down into ethanol or alcohol and carbon dioxide. Ethanol and alcohol are basically the same, but ethanol is more scientific. Glucose gives you ethanol plus carbon dioxide plus some energy. So this is a word equation, and the chemical equation says 6C6H12O6 gives you 2C2H5OH, which is the formula for ethanol, and carbon dioxide 2CO2 and some energy. Ethanol makes a good fuel and will burn to produce a lot of heat. So it still has a lot of chemicals energy stored in it. Next. Anaerobic respiration in muscles. Muscles can also respire anaerobically when they are short of oxygen. This kind of respiration mostly happens with athletes after a long sprint or exercises. This is the time glucose is broken down into substances called lactic acid. So when you're running very fast, you can't breathe properly and run at the same time. And so that means you are in short supply of oxygen. And you need a lot of energy to run. So this is when our muscles respire anaerobically because they are not getting enough oxygen to respire aerobically. So they do anaerobic respiration and they produce lactic acid, which is very poisonous in the muscles. In order to oxidize this lactic acid, our body does a process called oxygen debt. Oxygen debt is when human breathes rapidly, inhaling more oxygen to oxidize the lactic acid. After the long sprint, when we pant. So when we are like breathing rapidly after a long sprint, it is when we are inhaling so much of oxygen to break the poisonous lactic acid. Lactic acid causes cramps in your thighs, creating so much of pain. And that poisonous lactic acid is really bad in our body. So we do the process of oxygen debt to break it. So glucose gives you lactic acid plus some energy is C6H12O6 gives you 2C3H6O3 plus energy. So this is the word equation and the chemical equation. These are very important. So this is how our muscles do anaerobic respiration. So after a long sprint, it is important to breathe rapidly. It is important to fant a lot so that the lactic acid gets cut down. That's why our coaches tell us to rest after a long sprint or a series of activities like push-ups, running, jumping jacks, and everything. So it is important because of the process oxygen debt and to break the lactic acid by oxidation. Next. Movement of materials in and out of the cells. Materials move in and out of the cell like glucose and oxygen, go inside the cell, and materials like carbon dioxide and water move out. All these materials move in or move out through the selectively permeable membrane. There are three ways in which molecules or ions move into and out of the cell: diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. Okay. So let's see diffusion. Diffusion is the process in which particles move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration until they reach a state of equilibrium. Equilibrium means equal. Diffusion occurs when there is a concentration gradient. Concentration gradient means when there is a difference between the concentrations in the area. Like over in my hand, if there are more chocolates, and in my hand there are less chocolates. So this is a concentration gradient. There is a difference in the concentration gradient. This hand has more concentration, this hand has less concentration. Diffusion happens in gases. Example, if the cell is making carbon dioxide by respiration, so there will be a high concentration of carbon dioxide inside the cell than outside the cell. So the molecules of carbon dioxide will move from inside to outside, from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. The opposite happens with oxygen. Respiration uses oxygen, so there is a higher concentration of oxygen molecules outside the cell than inside the cell. So they move from an area of high concentration, which is outside, to inside, where there is an area of low concentration. As you can see in this diagram, over here on this side, there is more concentration of particles, and over here there is a less concentration of particles. And this is the selectively permeable membrane. So these particles will diffuse to the other side until they reach a state of equilibrium, which is this. So over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 particles are here, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Equilibrium over here and over here, they are in the equal state. This happens over time. It does not happen in a flash. It takes time. Next, factors affecting rate of diffusion. The concentration gradient. Diffusion happens more quickly when there is a steep concentration gradient or a high concentration gradient. They both mean the same. The surface area to volume ratio. The larger the area in proportion to the volume will increase the rate of reaction. The distance. If the distance is less, then the rate of reaction will be higher. So if one molecule is here and the other molecule is somewhere 5 kilometers away, the rate of diffusion will be low because they have to travel all the way till the partially permeable membrane and then go to the other side, and this side have to go up again here. So it's a lot of distance, so it takes time. Temperature. Higher the temperature, the higher the rate of reaction, because when particles are given heat, they gain more kinetic energy, which allows them to move faster and increase the rate of reaction. So this is the basic nature of particles. So when they get more and more energy, they can move more faster, and they get energy through heat. So heat gives them more energy, kinetic energy, which allows them to move faster. And in this case, if they move faster, there will be an increase in the rate of reaction. Next, osmosis. Osmosis is the type of diffusion that happens in water. Osmosis happens when the total concentration of all dissolved substances inside and outside the cell are different. Water will move across the membrane from the more dilute solution to the most concentrated solution. Dilute solution means when there is more water than substances, then more water than material in the solution, and concentration means there is more material in the water than the water. There's more material in the solution than water. So it still follows the diffusion rule. Osmosis can only happen when there is a partially permeable membrane. Osmosis is important for water moving from cell to cell. So osmosis happens in water, same thing as diffusion, but diffusion happens in gases, osmosis happens in water. Okay, in this diagram, you can see that over here, it is a more dilute solution. There's more water than particles. And over here, it's a more concentrated solution. So over time, they will do the process of osmosis from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. They will switch, and then they will reach a state of equilibrium. And this green line is the partially permeable membrane. And over here, it also says the same thing. They will move from one side to another side and slowly reaching equilibrium, which is like this in water. Okay, in water. Osmosis. Now, active transport. Active transport can be a little tricky, but please try. Diffusion and osmosis do not need any external chemicals to do the process. They completely depend on the kinetic energy of the particles. This is not the case with active transport. It is against the concentration gradient. It uses chemicals to do the transfer. See, like to explain this paragraph, it means that it uses chemicals to do the process. So technically in diffusion and osmosis, they move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. In active transport, it is the opposite way. They move from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. This does not happen naturally because it uses chemicals. And naturally, they should go from high to low. But in active transport, since they use chemical, they go from low to high. So it is just pumping the molecules or ions into the cell by external sources. The pumps are large protein molecules located in the cell membrane, and they are driven by the breakdown of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. An example is in our small intestines, where some glucose in the gut is absorbed into the cells lining in the intestines by active transport. Plants also take up certain mineral ions in this way. Cells use active transport to control the take-up of many substances. Okay. So the diagram will be like there will be a container with a membrane in between, and they will have a small holder kind of thing. So one molecule from the low concentration will go fit into this lock, and then the lock switches side, and then it releases into the area of high concentration. So this lock is the chemical. So it takes the low particles in the low concentration, holds them, and transfer it to the high concentration. This is the job of this holder. Okay. So next, cell division and differentiation. Okay. Multicellular organisms like plants and animals, even us, start as a single fertilized egg cell called zygote. This divides into 2 cells, then 4 cells, then 8 cells, and so on until an adult body contains countless millions of cells. This type of cell division is called mitosis and is under the control of the genes. Firstly, all the chromosomes in the nucleus are copied. Then the nucleus splits into 2 daughter cells. The cytoplasm then divides, forming 2 smaller cells. These then take in food substances to supply energy and building material so that they can grow into full size. This process is repeated, but as the developing embryo grows, cells become specialized to carry out roles. This specialization is also under the control of the genes. This is called differentiation. Different kinds of cells develop depending on where they are in the embryo. Example, a nerve cell in the spinal cord. So basically what this does, this zygote is the original one, and then the chromosomes in the nucleus are copied, control C, and then 2 daughter cells, control V, kind of thing. They say 2 daughter cells because it's a splitting, right? So it is kind of like an offspring. So it splits that way, and then forming 2 smaller cells like this. So this is the original one, then it control A, control C, 2. And then it divides into 4, and then a huge embryo. Okay, this process is repeated, but as the developing embryo grows, cells become specialized into carrying out roles. It is just like humans. We start off as a baby, we crawl, we walk, we then start to talk, and then our hair grows, and then we study, and then we go to colleges, and then we get our jobs. So that is when the cells become specialized and start to carry out roles. So we go to a job, we have a specific duty to do in our jobs. So this is when they get to carry out special roles. This specialization is also under the control of the genes, and this is called differentiation. So it is comparing with our own lives, how we start off and how we end up. So this is an example. This is a nerve cell. axon for carrying the nerve impulse. There are millions of cells like this, but it all started as one single cell called zygote. Okay. Next, cells, tissues, and organs. Cells with similar functions are grouped together as tissues. Example, muscle tissues. So in our hand, if we are moving it forward and backward, there is a group of muscles which are helping me move it, group of cells. And these are tissues, muscle tissues. A collection of several tissues carrying out a particular function is called an organ. So if there is my heart, the heart is made up of so many tissues doing a single function. That's why it is an organ. Our heart is an organ. It is made up of several tissues carrying out a particular function. Plants also have tissues and organs. Leaves, roots, stems, flowers, fruit are all plant organs. In animals, jobs are carried out by different organs working together. This is called the organ system. There are 7 main systems: the digestive system, gas exchange system, including the lungs, which exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide. Like ventilation, we take oxygen in when we take carbon dioxide out. So there's an exchange. So if you take in oxygen, carbon dioxide should come out. That's the process. Circulatory system, including the heart and blood vessels, which transport material around the body. Excretory system, including kidneys, they filter waste from the blood. Nervous system, consisting of the brain, spinal cord, and nerve, which control and coordinate the body's actions. Endocrine system, glands secreting hormones which act as chemical messengers. Reproductive system, producing offspring. And this is the digestive system, a small example about our topic. So this is our second half part of the topic organisms and life processes. And there is one last topic called stem cells, which is a very important one, which I will explain in detail in our next class. Thank you. Bye.